something new for this channel. I say that as if this channel has any form of consistency or theming in what I upload to it, which is not the case in the absolute slightest, but nevertheless, welcome to something new. More specifically, my review slash very messy thoughts on this bad boy, Brandon Sanderson's Oathbringer. Yeah, this is probably going to be a very incredibly messy video, as you can already tell, because I'm doing this pretty much completely off the cuff, because the last scripted video that I did it's just lost. It's gone. Literally, the day I finished editing it and was ready to export and upload it, it just gone. It's not there anymore. So, needless to say, I'm not really ready to start re-editing that quite yet. So I figured to myself, hey, why not just do this as a short little thing in between? And now here we are. So, if for some reason you don't know, Brandon Sanderson is an author most well known for his works of modern fantasy, and I'm just gonna see. There we go. His works of modern fantasy, more specifically, those within his Cosmere universe, which, if I had to surmise, is basically a universe of fantasy worlds and stories that are all interconnected by this very mysterious, vague, and incredibly deep lore, and it's phenomenal. So now, over the last year or so that I've been really reading these books and getting into them, they've managed to grab me and pull me in a way that not many other works of fiction and art really have. And Oathbringer, oh boy, Oathbringer is absolutely no exception. So, that's probably enough padding for time, because I don't know what on earth I am doing. Let's get into the actual meat of this bad boy. So how about those characters, those juicy, the backbone of any good story or work of fiction? More specifically, Dalinar, because this very much so, as most of you who've actually read these already know, is Dalinar's book. Dalinar is, over the course of reading these books, has kind of become my favorite character in the Stormlight Archive thus far. The way that Sanderson writes and handles Dalinar's internal struggle and conflict with himself and the man he used to be is incredibly well handled and is beautifully engaging on every level possible, especially in Oathbringer, where we get to see a lot more of Dalinar's past and what led him to becoming the man he is currently. Because if you didn't know, this isn't a spoiler because we know this very blatantly from the first book, Dalinar used to be kind of a terrible human being, a literal monster, a literal warmongering, conquering monster. Seeing what the horrible things that led him to where he is now and the man he is now, and seeing this character arc take place through these flashbacks is genuinely fascinating. Is a really interesting way of exploring Dalinar's character further and expanding upon what we already know about him without having to kind of dampen what we've gotten so far with him. And it's incredible. And that's not to say that the other characters in this book and in the rest of Stormlight as a whole are bad. Goodness me, no. They're all phenomenal in their own right. Especially Shallan in Oathbringer. Honestly, I think Shallan probably gets some of my favorite development for her character in this book, especially in later parts when her identity crisis starts to really kick into full gear. In these smaller moments during the Battle of Thaylen City, it is genuinely fantastic stuff all around. Surprisingly enough, though, Kaladin seems to take kind of a back seat for most of the book. It's not to say that the development he gets in this book is bad by any means. A lot of Kaladin's development during, especially the Battle of Kholinar, is incredible. It just doesn't really quite have the same kind of kick to it that it has had in Words of Radiance and The Way of Kings, which I think is kind of a good thing. I'm kind of glad that Sanderson let Kaladin take a little bit of a back seat throughout this book to let the other characters kind of shine through and have a lot of their own development, which is very necessary when you're dealing with the amount of characters that you're dealing with in Stormlight. Dear Lord. And all of the other kind of secondary protagonists like Yasna, Adolin, Renarin, Navani, they all get phenomenal development to their characters throughout this book, especially Adolin. Adolin has some really good stuff in this book, honestly. It's not the best in the as a whole, but I genuinely really enjoyed reading a lot of the stuff about Adolin, especially during their trip through Shadesmar. Speaking of Shadesmar, how about that world building? Because, dear lord, the world building in this book is fantastic. Which really is something that you kind of come to expect after a certain period of time reading Sanderson books. That's just kind of going to be a given, but nevertheless, the world building here is phenomenal. The exploration of the Heralds and the Oath Pact and the events that led to this apocalyptic setting that these characters are now facing is fantastic. And I love the fact that we get just an entire elongated sequence with these 3 to 4 characters going through Shadesmar and seeing the world of the Spren elaborated on, and seeing a lot more of this straight up culture and world. It is perfection. Now, alongside phenomenal characters and phenomenal world building, this book also has, honestly, shockingly good pacing, which, I mean, yes, other Sanderson books have good pacing, but I don't really think that any of them have flowed quite as well as Oathbringer did, for me personally at least. That pacing, the pacing in this book, the rhythm it moves along at, it's smooth like butter. It's a buttery book. I don't, what am I doing with my life? Send help, please. And lastly, because I'm gonna try to draw this gosh dang mess of a video to a close, right here, I just kind of want to bring up the climax to this book, because, oh boy, the climax to this book is something else, let me tell ya. If there's one thing that Sanderson does, amidst everything else that he does very well, his climaxes are superb. This man knows how to write an engaging climax and a phenomenal building climax with these grand operatic crescendos. And Oathbringer has got some of the craziest stuff in part 5, honestly. And that is saying something after Words of Radiance. Part 5 of Oathbringer is running on pure crack and adrenaline the whole time, and I love it. So, where do we stand? Where do I stand finally on Oathbringer? My very eloquent, well-worded opinion on this book. It's fantastic. What else am I gonna say about it? It's a gosh dang good book. Just go read it now. If you haven't read Stormlight for some reason, go read it right now. So I give Oathbringer out of 10. I give it a quality out of 10. It's a good book. And if you happen to like other Stormlight related Cosmere-related things, why don't you go check out the podcast, which I will now abrasively and shamelessly plug, which me and my good pal Tom host, because just last month we covered the Way of Kings as our main topic. So if you like some mediocre discussion about that book, go listen to that podcast. It's way less messy and incoherent than this train wreck of a video was. So yeah, thank you for sitting through this thing, and I'll yeah.